Sorry. Hi, everyone. We're live now. This is a history of giant robots in tabletop RPGs, which is actually a rerun of a panel that we did at Big Bad Con 2024. We have an absolutely stacked panel here of people who are involved in tabletop role-playing games, and especially like mecha tabletop role-playing games. And I am going to introduce our panel, starting with myself. I'm going to be moderating the panel. My name's Aaron Lim, he/him pronouns, and I made like mech games like Spectres of Brocken, and I'm currently working on a couple more mech-related games called Blade Breaker and Speed Mech. You can find my stuff at aaronlime.itch.io, and you can find me on social media at aaronlime, .bsky.social, however that suffix goes in on Blue Sky. And yeah, that's me. I'll get Austin to introduce himself next.
Hi, I'm Austin Ramsay. I use she, her pronouns. I am the designer of Beam Saber, amongst other tabletop role playing games, and I've also done freelance mech work for Eldritch Automata and Ariadne and Bob. You can find my games at austin-ramsay.itch.io, and you can find me on most social media at Austin Ramsay Games.
All right, cool. We are going in alphabetical order, so that's Evan Torner next.
Hi, I'm Evan Torner. Some people know me as a role-playing scholar because I co-founded Analog Game Studies and am also an editor at International Journal of Role Playing. But I'm a big mech fan, and I guess the Golden Cobra Challenge, which I also co-founded, it has one of my mech games called Tu Abu Sami, and I also am working on a noir mecha game, kind of like Giant Robo or Big O, as well. So this is partially a dev talk for me too.
All right, coming up next, we have Pam Punzalan.
Hi, I'm Pam. So I did Navatham's End with my wife, Cinta Posadas, but our main mech game is Public Utility Mechs. It was a very small, cute mecha game that is meant to describe transforming jeepneys from our country, the Philippines, and transforming tricycles as well. Another mech-related thing that I did was the mech and pilot version of Gun and Slinger. So you can find a lot of my work on itch.io, and my website is on the slide, and you can also follow me on socials for the Dovetailer. I do have Twitter, but I'm mostly on Blue Sky these days. So that's me.
All right, and last but not least, we have Takuma.
Hi, I'm Takuma. I have made a couple games for the Emotional Mecha Jam, which I co-ran with John Harness. And I've dabbled in other mech stuff here and there. Done some work on Beam Saber. Done other games like Stewpot and Alone Among the Stars. You can find me at neurothome.itch.io. That's my itch URL, and also my Blue Sky as well.
Right, cool. Right, so we have everyone on the panel here talking about history of giant robots in tabletop RPGs. But before we get to that, we're just going to define some terms, so to speak. What we talk about when we talk about mecha, and what does it mean to be a mecha tabletop RPG. I think the thing that we kind of like narrowed down on is that it has a mechanical focus on being in a mech, basically what we're saying is that we're discounting games where you can have mechs, and mechs aren't like the major thing in it. I think there's like a bunch of sci-fi games that allow you to have a mech as part of it, as part of like this big, everything in the sci-fi genre is fair game. So we're not really focusing on that. We might mention some of those games and like how putting like mecha in context in some of those games. I think we are mainly focusing on games that have being in a mech as a big mechanical focus of the game, and also using the mecha genre as like a narrative driver for the game. Yeah, so that's what we're focusing on, and then mecha as part of sci-fi, as like part of like other stuff. We might talk about it a little bit, but it's not the focus. So if you basically, if you see the list of games that we're talking about, it's like, hey, what about this game that had mechs in it? It's like, that's the reason why we are not putting it there. Not because we don't think it's important, it's just that we're just trying to keep the focus a little bit more narrow here. Otherwise, we'll be talking for 2 hours. So 3 hours, maybe. Yeah, and I think what we want to focus on is like to try to talk about the games and like the history of like how the mecha genre has been represented in tabletop RPGs, and also talk about like resonant themes, factors, and influences for why and how the games are situated within the context of like when they came out, when they were designed, who designed them, where were they designed, what other things they were responding to. In terms of not just the media that they were responding to, but like just the general. So, for example, the environment that tabletop RPGs were being made in the time as well, and then how do games focus on and express all these different themes and influences in different ways. So that's something that hopefully we can get into this more this time, now that we have a little bit more time compared to when we were doing the panel at Big Bad Con, right? So let's. I'm going to pass this early part on to Evan, just because Evan, you have a lot of knowledge of like a lot of the older games.
Yeah, this is where I shine. Well, I was a little one in the '80s, but I definitely played these games as soon as I was able to when I was like 8 or 9, and because these were games that allowed you to build a cool robot. So this is a point where anime sort of triggers this whole global fandom around mecha, especially Gundam, and no one can use the Gundam trademarks in any way, shape, or form, and so there is a kind of Gundam-esque proliferation in sort of the mid 80s with these giant robot RPGs. I should say Mechton was the first RPG by tabletop role-playing's first Black American designer, Mike Pondsmith, who explicitly made this as a traveler hack, but that the Mechton system becomes cyberpunk, right? Literally, it's a traveler hack, and by which I mean it's much more about building a system to build other things with, right? So travelers, like, you build galaxies, you build starships, you build weapons, all through these different tables. You even generate your characters through sort of this life path system that's kind of like building them, and then that translates well into of course mech creation. So I would describe these games in particular as very much about designing a mech that you will be in to then spend most of your time in a sort of anime show-esque environment, mostly in combat, fighting. You will be shooting stuff and deciding, are the cool missiles that I took actually effective in the fight, or should I replace them with something else, with my mercenary rewards or something like that. So I won't say they downplayed story, but story was not mechanized. Next slide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So before I go to the next slide, I just thought it's interesting to point out, like, early on the first three in like the early days. So also to give context, I've in the slides we've separated out a lot of these games into like notable eras, and then we'll talk about notable games within these eras. And so we're talking about like the early days here in the 80s and 90s of tabletop role playing.
Yeah.
And also, so the thing that I did want to note is that the three of them that we mentioned here in the mid 80s, and like why probably a lot of us aren't talking about it so much is like, for example, I was just born. Right. So I was not born with a gunpla in my hand, so I did not know any of these. But it's notable that like what you mentioned, right? Like the mechanical simulation of it, and also that like all three of them were very explicitly tied to existing IP, right? Like that's Robotech, or Macross and others. That's Mech Warrior, which was its own like there's a whole tabletop game around it, and Mech-Ton, it seems like it is like original, but that's only because you can't call it Gundam.
That's right. Yeah, and again, I would say these are all war games, right? Ultimately, you're going to be simulating war, probably. Even with Mech Warrior, you're going to be using even a BattleTech map, but otherwise you might be drawing some diagrams or doing theater of the mind warfare. But it's very important to know how much damage your missile does or how much heat your mech generates as it moves.
Okay.
Next slide.
Moving on.
So that gets kind of ponderous for people, and they want to do a little bit more world building. I want to add rifts and the mechanoids because, of course, at the time in the late 80s, early 90s, there is a huge kind of back and forth RPG dialogue about what tank level damage should be. How that should be simulated, so that of course in the Rifts and Palladium universe it convenes something called the mega damage, where 1 point of mega damage is like 100 points of regular damage, and this translates in Mech-Ton Zeta as 25 points of damage is 1 kill point, right? And so what this does is creates the distinction between little human combat and mighty mech combat, and then Rifts, Big Eye Small Mouth, all of these games more or less decide, okay, but now can we have cool anime figures that can also do that like level of damage with their fists? And so rather than playing into mecha, it's like mecha plus other stuff, to be very blunt. And so anime as a genre comes into play, but also these kind Rifts as a multiverse creation as well. Aaron.
Oh no, just okay. So Austin, I think your mechanical keyboard
Yep, I
sound is coming
realized.
through.
I've stopped typing.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's all good.
So please continue.
Yeah. So to end this part of the story, it's acknowledged that maybe mech games should interface with other genres. It's not quite clear how that's going to work, because part of the reason why we watch mech anime is the total destruction that you can witness that the different giant robots can inflict on each other. That's totally beyond human scale, but you're still creating vulnerable human characters somewhere in the middle of it all. And these are again some of the factors for the early days. There's an early tabletop RPG boom which ends around 1998. Post World War II industrialized warfare, meaning very specifically that we have tanks, but also with the nuclear weapon, you have the counterbalance between conventional warfare and nuclear warfare, which is also directly thematized in both mecha anime as well as in the RPGs. Basically, there are usually super weapons. The bad guys want them. You are going to use your mighty mecha to stop them.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. Like with I think with early mecha, there was this like the super robot genre was a lot more about like the mech as like a super powerful thing, right? Like like almost like a metaphor for like a big powerful thing, and then with the difference between like Gundam and all is like they get treated almost like airplane pilots, like fighter pilots, and then like you mentioned like tanks, right? Like so we can see how like mechanized warfare is being used, and what's the word for it? Like used as a metaphor. So like whether they're fighter pilots or whether they're tanks, there are some like mech anime coming soon that will treat mechs more like tanks, and some that treat them more like ace, like fighter pilots, and that gives like different flavors to like mecha media as well, right? Which metaphors you look at mechs, which lens you use to view mechs through. All right, we're going
Yeah, we will we'll gloss over this really quickly. There was not a lot going on that was very interesting in mech tabletop RPGs. This is in part because we saw the collapse of the big splat book genre right in 1998 or so, which is, again, you're selling a glossy book with a full color cover that has these great mech illustrations inside and theoretically more resources for your players to use. The bottom falls out in this market, and there's not a lot of publishers who make that much money during this time. And then everything becomes D20 because that's actually still has a captive audience and market, and that's why, again, we got a variety of different RPGs. I still think Dragon Mech is cool and worth a discussion, but we can kind of gloss over it. I wanted to mention the Mechaton tabletop hobby game because this becomes then a little game called Mobile Frame Zero later on, and then Firebrands. So Mechaton is already in its early playtest stage, but it's called Mechaton, and then Artel Saurian Games did say you cannot use that name, it's too similar to ours.
And I think for the rest of us, young ones, younger ones, this is probably when we would have started interacting with mecha games, or at least mecha fiction, or like media, if not games. So I'm curious I want to use this opportunity to start asking everyone, what was the first like mech game you played? Evan, you can answer this as well.
The first mech TTRPG game that I played was the one I wrote in middle school when I was 13, because Gundam Wing was on the air and I was already playing D&D with my friends. And so I thought, why not make a TTRPG of this, inspired heavily by this show that I really like. And so I, put my skills to the task and took my first swing of 3 at a mecha tabletop RPG.
I might be the slightly odd one here in that the first mecha TTRPG I did see was actually the Robotech one, even though I was very young at the time, and I only recognized the thing on the cover because I was like, baby Pam was utterly obsessed with being a Veritech pilot. Like, I rewatched the first 5 episodes of Robotech multiple times, as kids do, right? And the game that I actually started playing was the war game for Mech Warrior, not like with the clicks and stuff, the same level as Hero Clicks. I used to do that, so that was my first interaction with mecha RPGs. We did see Big Eyes Small Mouth, but as per the hell of scheduling, us high school kids never got to actually get a group together to play it. So that was my first encounter.
I think the first mecha tabletop game I ever played, and also like first game I ever ran, was Beam Saber. I think that's true. I didn't really play a lot of tabletop games before that, besides some D&D. I think I played like a few video games also, but yeah, there wasn't honestly a lot of playable mech stuff around me that I was aware of growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, BattleTech and then Mech Warrior because I wanted to play like Barbie Mech, BattleTech with my friends. Basically, like I wanted the drama behind the pilots too, but we were trapped between, like, I wanted to generate soap operas and everybody else wanted to have like a world-ending threat that we always banded together to stop. And I'm like, yeah, but what about our crumbling marriage? That's what I wanted to explore in my mech game, and I was ostracized because we were, I think, 12 or 13.
Yeah. I think for myself, I also didn't play like a mecha tabletop RPG until really late. I think Firebrands might have been technically my first one. But I had been playing like mecha like tabletop games before that. I think the closest encounter I had was like back in uni. I saw people playing like BattleTech, the the miniatures game, but like it has the full like character sheet with like hit locations and everything. Actually, is that the miniatures game or the tabletop RPG? I don't know. Like
Yeah,
they had a
that's classic BattleTech. I play it most Wednesdays with my
yeah.
friends.
Yeah. And the thing there is just like back then it was really expensive in Malaysia to like get like tabletop RPGs. So for example, like the one of the main ways I interacted with tabletop RPGs at that point in time was trying to figure out how it worked by like reading forums. There's no actual play. I just have to read some forums and like when people write their play reports, there's not a lot of talk about mechanics in there. It's like, okay, there's this cool story. How did that happen? No idea. And then like early days of the internet, like even with mecha anime, it's like my main like interaction with mecha anime at that time actually is just mech designs and gunpla, because the Malaysian TV wasn't showing a lot of like mech anime, and if you wanted to, you would have to get it from Hong Kong, via Hong Kong, and either have dodgy subtitles or dodgy dubs. So a lot of what I knew about like what you were talking about, Evan, the crumbling marriage part of it, I was like, no idea. I had no idea what the wing boys were shouting at each other in the few episodes that I watched, right?
That's such an interesting like experience because like we didn't get the Hong Kong side in the Philippines. Like the first, I think the mech anime that rewired many a Fujoshi girl's brain, and I think this goes for not just the Philippines, but North America too, right? Was really Gundam Wing, right? So I was a bit of the outlier in that I was straddling two lines. Like I personally attached myself very strongly to Gundam Wing, while also thinking about Battletech and MechWarrior because those were books I had read, even if I might not have fully understood it. But like the anime experience in the Philippines was you got your subtitles from pirated Viz video copies. That's what happened. So you got it from some sketchy source, somebody ripping something from the American side, and we kind of just paced with each other. For the oldies though, like my senior anime fans, their first mech anime was usually Voltron or Voltes 5. Voltes 5 is very important for older generations of Filipino watchers because it was the anime that was banned by the martial law regime because it talked about the revolution. And everybody remembers that if they're a little older than me, and that kind of informed sensibilities on how future designers and future writers grappled with like mechs and themes of mass armies and destruction and handling super robots. So
Yeah. Cool. Move on to the next slide.
Yeah, I mean, again, at this point, in the early 2000s, we actually did not want to have a lot of games about war, or were more or less, beholden to the D20 system if we were publishing professionally, and so during this time, of course, is the pressure cooker of all the cool indie stuff that would later become much more professional and colorful. But right now at this time everything was these small little zines and 500 copies and no ISBNs and sell them for $10 sort of thing. Next slide.
Just a quick question before we go to the next slide. Were PDFs common in this era?
Yes and no. So you needed to have Adobe Acrobat Reader, but as soon as we could make PDFs, we made PDFs. So that would be 2002 or so. It was 2008 when the format really became democratized. But up at before then, you would still get PDFs with the understanding that you would need to get some sort of, at the time, pirated form of Adobe PDF Reader, and so you would have a pirated Adobe Reader and a PDF file that was created also probably through pirated software, and then that was sold. But there's not a lot of money in tabletop RPGs, so as soon as we were able to sell any sort of stable digital format that was great. Parallel, everything was being pirated and torrented by or not torrented, first file shared and then torrented. So we had sort of LimeWire-esque services, and then BitTorrent came in the mid 2000s, and of course that's important because that's how most RPGs circulated in PDF. So it was the indie people who were selling their games, where you had to actually like write a check or send a PayPal in the early days of PayPal. And, that was how it worked. And because it was not secure otherwise to pay anyone online. And at the other side, the PDF ecosystem really only standardized again around RPG Now and Drive-Thru RPG sort of in the late 2000s, and that was considered to be very, very bad for RPGs. I mean, in the end, Indie Press Revolution sort of formed from people who were rebelling against the new, capitalist sites, while also saying, well, we shouldn't just pirate everyone's stuff 100%. And I hate that we had to have that conversation, but it definitely produced the PDF environment that we now have.
Yeah. I was curious because like before that, a lot of my interaction with tabletop role-playing games was through forums, right?
Right.
And people's forums posts. And then if we're talking about that crunch in the D20 era where everyone was mainly doing, you mentioned professional tabletop RPGs were mainly doing D20 work, and then forming that group of eventually indie tabletop designers. So I was just curious whether technology played a role in that of once a more standardized format of sharing things became available rather than just sending. Would you have sent Word docs to each other back then? I think even file transfers were tricky at the time, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So often you would in the early days you would post your whole game on a web page, and that was that, right? So your game was just on a web page, and that's what it was. Then that was not considered to be very secure, so people would try various ways of password protection, and then the early days of PDF imprinting. But I mean everything was just a little bit unstable. So your steady audience were people at conventions, and now I can kind of recall why in the indie scene no one was attempting a mecha RPG mostly for the 2000s. It was because you would have to match the art. And the art, and we did not have good art or artists in the scene beyond a certain point. We did have okay. Everyone was doing okay on that front, but we did not have exceptional artists like we do today, who would value their work at that. So we also couldn't match pound for pound what had come before, for example, from Artel Sorian Games or Palladium or from FASA.
All right. So we go into the 2010s.
Yes, this is some good shit. This is when we get into the feelings. Bliss Stage, which again is an Evangelion kind of, you are scared adolescents being shoved into mechs, and now you have to fight for the very survival of humanity. And Tears of the Machine is also by Russell Collins. It's just a gorgeous piece of design if you've ever played it. Again, this is the conversion of let's take a look at mecha in terms of all the little things that you can do to assemble a mech to mechs are actually metaphors for human relationships, for big feelings about scary problems and so forth. Mobile Frame Zero, which again you're building mechs out of Legos, then has its parallel RPG, which is Mobile Frame Zero Firebrands, which we now can recognize in terms of the all my games are a bunch of mini games format. One of which is Stew Pot by Takuma Okada, which is which is great because it actually allows you to really focus all of your scenes on, I would say, genre appropriate models, right? And so Firebrands has both the intense mech fighting as well as the team interplay and the downtime kind of built into the mechanics.
Yeah, I'm actually curious now that you mentioned it, Evan. Right, I'm curious, Takuma, about your experience with Firebrands.
I actually, I mean, part of why I designed Stewpot and part of why so few of the Stewpot games are actually um, hacks of the Firebrands games is because I struggled a little bit playing it, um, and I wanted more from them, and I wanted different kinds of prompts. Um, but like the first time I heard it played, because I think I first heard it played on Friends of the Table, and then also played it later as the end of a campaign. Um, that like mini game format really, really appealed to me, and I think if you think about one of the main ways that people experience mecha media being animated TV shows, like the mini games drawing from like episodes of a show having their thing that's happening in that, it's like a very natural transition, or like manga chapters or that kind of thing, right? These distinct
Mhm.
pieces that all fit together. Um, and yeah, that just felt like a really natural way to design a game to me, and it really stuck with me. As well as, I like to say that the Sunderland honestly played more of a role in kind of the way I was thinking about designing those games, because I saw that those as a little more, these are a little more standalone, but they do share a setting, as opposed to the Firebrands. These things kind of are scenes that lead into one another.
And also, since you mentioned Friends at the Table,
There
we'll
it
talk about
is.
factors and influences here.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of stuff in the 2010s, and even like just slightly before that, right? With the way that mecha stuff came out of Japan and then influenced people that went on to make more stuff like all over the world. Um, one of the actual early experiences I had with something like that I fully experienced on my own was the Leviathan series by Scott Westerfeld, which is like a alternate historical fiction thing where there's like steampunk World War One mechs and bio airships.
Mhm.
And I was just looking this up, but it turns out that part of the reason why that series is the way it is, why they partnered with Keith Thompson, who's an incredible artist who drew all
Right.
of those, is because in 2007, Scott Westerfeld, the author, got copies of the Japanese versions of his book Uglies, and it was illustrated, light novel style.
Ooh.
And he was like, "Oh, why don't we do this?" And a lot of his fans were also like, "Yeah, there should be illustrations."
That
And
makes so much sense. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
he said he had a little bit of Japanese from college, and I was like, "Oh yeah, you were watching anime in college. Like
Yeah.
this all makes sense now."
Yeah.
And he also found that obviously like English titles did also used to have illustrations, especially World War One adventure novels. So it was a perfect fit to be like, okay, let's do more of a light novel thing with this mecha and like really cool biomechanical stuff, and like draw on both that historical thing and from current light novels.
Yeah. 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 So I think we can. I wasn't part of like making games at this era at the time. Like seriously, I was mainly trying to make board games still. But I think Austin, you mentioned that like you had like multiple goals at like making a mecha tabletop RPG, and I know when we talked about this at Big Bad Con, I think I had put Beam Saber a little bit later than this. But you actually mentioned that you had worked on like proto Beam Saber already at around this time.
Not exactly. Beam Saber's my third swing at making a mecha tabletop role playing game, but the first two took place like 3 years apart. One in like 2001 when I was in grade 8, and then the second one I would have been in like grade 11. And so that would have been like 2005, somewhere around there. So still well before this era of game design.
Right. Well, it's more because we we put a Beam Saber with the current revival, which is like 2018 onwards. But I think you mentioned that like you had started before 2018 as well.
Yeah, so technically I started in 2017 is when I started taking notes after playing a single session of Firebrands with some friends, and I had basically not been into mecha for like a decade by that point. And that totally revived my love of the genre. And so I started working on Beam Saber in part because I remember how the mechs were in counterweight, how they were sort of ad hoc added into the sprawl after they left Mech Noir. And I wanted to say, okay, well, what does a PBTA game look like when you start making it from the ground up for mechs? And that was my initial design goal. And I eventually switched to Forged in the Dark when I heard about Blades in the Dark's downtime, and I can never remember the Blades equivalent of what a mission is. I always forget because I'm so Beam Saber brained by this point.
Score.
Score.
A
Score,
Yeah.
right? Yes.
Yeah.
When I heard about the score and downtime cycle, I was like, that would be perfect. In no small part because at that time I was actually particularly hurting from another campaign where I made a character who needed downtime and never got it to fully function. But that is not a story for tonight.
Yeah. I think I should mention Friends at the Table again, because I think that's also one of the points. Like, I also played Firebrands because of Friends at the Table. I was like, I was looking for like indie like RPGs to check out at the time, and like kind of like rediscovering my love for like mecha stuff as well, because like in like the early in the 2010s, then like it became a lot easier to get a bunch of like different anime, and it became a lot easier to go into the past and like and get older anime as well. So I started like watching some older stuff and like more current stuff with like I think Eureka 7 and Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann was like huge at the time, which kind of like revitalized some interest in like mecha anime as well, and then it was curious that like I was listening to like different APs like mostly on podcasts at the time, right, for actual plays, and Friends at the Table did stand out as like one of the few sci-fi mecha shows at the time with counterweight, and that was something that's like, oh shit, like not many people are doing this and it's like really cool, but they are also not really playing like you mentioned they played it was Mech Noir at first and then the Sprawl, right? And that is like you said, like it's not really a bespoke mecha game. I think Mech Noir is and then but even Mech Noir is a hack of
it's a hack of
yeah,
Tech Noir.
it's a hack of Tech Noir, right? So that itch starts. It's like, oh, yeah, maybe we can do better here. So yeah, I think that's a part of it for myself, like making Spectres later on. Like this is also one of the things that influenced me, like hearing like, oh shit, this is, you can do these kinds of storytelling in tabletop RPGs, and you can do this kind of storytelling in the mecha genre that like a little bit more decompressed, a little bit more like focused in on like the things that I want it to focus in on, and not beholden to 52 episode anime where you also have to sell toys, right? Yeah.
I want to mention Pacific Rim real quick too, because that was like I think a really big example of a lot of people coming up with characters in a mech and role playing those characters, and like making characters from other properties into Jaeger pilots, like Disney characters, and I think that movie does an incredible job of highlighting the relationships between pilots and the emotional aspects of mecha. Silly as it is. And I think that really got a lot of people, and I think for a lot of people who don't watch anime, they still watched Pacific Rim and
Yeah.
really enjoyed it.
Yep. Yep.
And I think that opened up that gate to a lot of people, especially artists on Tumblr who maybe weren't as interested in mecha things before.
It certainly hit a lot of the, not the TTRPG designers per se, but the play-by-post RPers.
Yes.
LiveJournal, Tumblr, Dreamwidth, all of that. And there is a Venn diagram, of course, with respect to who used to RP like that and who designs, and also who ends up writing fiction that is Pacific Rim inspired. They all bleed into one another, and since it's a whole mixed media, inevitably you will catch on and gain your own ideas, I suppose. I think the moment you said Pacific Rim and how it was influenced, I was like, oh yeah, I can think of at least upwards of 20 different play-by-post RPGs that used to come out. And did I do that, or was I know someone who knew somebody, or maybe I even ERP'd with that person. And if you don't know what ERP is, fans, figure it out, because I'm not going to tell you.
I just want to mention that I was going through my archives, right, just here that in 2016, when Sean Nittner was running for Games on Demand for us at Origins, a playtest of a game called Blades in the Dark. That parallel, I think Dana Freed and Strash Asimovic both had Pacific Rim hack games there at the both of which were, you've got dual pilots who have to somehow mind sync with all of the psychosexual backdrop of that particular gesture, and so now that I'm thinking about it historically, Blades in the Dark is this thing that obviously now it dwarfs everything else, but at the time, if you were really cool in the scene, you were definitely doing a Pacific Rim fandom hack using Apocalypse World mechanics.
Yeah, I mentioned when I was playtesting Spectres as well. Like you mentioned, right? People who don't know mecha anime or mecha tropes at all, I will ask them but you know Pacific Rim, right? And they're like, yeah, I think that's also why I had I included in the game a Pacific Rim inspired setting, right, of giant robots fighting kaiju, just because that was such a common touchstone for non-mecha fans during the playtest. That was okay, I'll just make this a thing since that seems to be a more common on ramp. Cool. So we'll talk about the emotional mecha jam now. That was a huge thing in early 2019. I think that's probably the thing that got me to get to know your games, Takuma, and even Pam and Austin as well, right? This is kind of the era of expansion post Google Plus imploding, and then there's I think there's a new scene that starts forming on itch, and
Yep.
I think the emotional mecha jam is a huge catalyst for that. So can you tell us a little bit more about how that came about, Takuma, and then for everyone else, how y'all were interfacing with that at the time as well?
It happened on Twitter, RIP Twitter, where I had been listening to Waypoint Radio, where they were talking about playing the BattleTech video game and the kind of emergent narratives that came out of that, the way pilots were dying, the way they got attached to certain pilots, and had been thinking about that and thinking about game design when John tweeted, gonna make a sad one-player mech game called Here in Your Arms, and it's about driving your lover's Gundam. Inspired single-handedly by sad Troa Barton. And I was like, oh, I've been thinking about this stuff too. You're playing the mech, the pilots keep dying, so you're playing the mech and you just get a bunch of pilots inside you, and you just kind of have to deal with that. And we started talking back and forth, like, should we do a zine, a bundle, what are we doing? And finally settled on a jam, because it seemed like an easy thing to do, and threw it together. John did a lot of work on this, setting up a lot of this, laying down the foundation of the kind of design constraints and what we were looking for with the jam entries, centering emotions in the mecha genre, and not centering combat, which is not to say that combat couldn't be in these games, but that we didn't want that to be the focus. We wanted the emotions to be front and center. And we, tweeted about it, talked to people we knew about it, and it kind of blew up way more than either of us was expecting, and turned into this whole thing. Did not imagine how resonant it was going to be, but it was really resonant for a lot of people, and it was really incredible to see, and was a really good time to be making things and be in conversation with a lot of other designers.
Yeah, I also want to add, because this is kind of important for TTRPG's history, like the emotional mecha jam was happening, and like Google Plus had collapsed, which also meant that a lot of Southeast Asian designers were coming out. Like Aaron already said it, that he had gotten like familiar with more of our designs, and that was like the big moment of like me and the other folks who were trying to push hashtag RPGC were very loud. So we were like, it's our time to shine, right? And in January 2019 was when Session Zero, the Southeast Asian tabletop convention, happened physically in the Philippines. Was it January or August? I'm mixing up my dates, but it was around that time, and I know that we had entries from the Emotional Mecha Jam being sold. Like Rollover Play Dead by Tun Kaipo was one of the games at that table. So it was there. I think Public Utility Mechs was also being sold there, among other games. But like, it was just a really good time because you had a lot of interesting energy, and while that wasn't necessarily about mecha, that was also the time that a lot of Southeast Asian designers were trying to think about like how to add internal dimensions to overarching themes in general with respect to games. So if it was about mechs, then it'd be, well, let's talk about the sad ass pilots, right, and tragedies. If it was about like swords and sorcery, then like, let's talk about what it's like to be in a dungeon with your lover that you have to bury. Like it was a lot of exploration on the human element, I guess, that was all constantly involved in games, or even just like taking the human out entirely and talking solely about feelings. So
I think we started the jam when there were less than 1,000 physical games in the category on itch, and ended that with more than 10% of the physical games on the site. And I feel like a lot of people felt like they wanted to make a thing about mechs, and there's so much about the genre. It like feels overcomplicated, and can be kind of intimidating to think about making something, whether it's drawing it, or all of these rules about combat and everything, and thinking, oh, I can just do the emotions and I can just do a page, 2 pages. Like, it really kind of unlocked the floodgates.
Yeah, and like the fact that it used the game jam functionality on itch was also really important, because I think at that point in time there were some people that had already been using itch. I mean, I put up my games on itch in like 2017, 2018 already, right? And I knew there were, like you mentioned, there were people putting physical games up on itch, but not a huge number. And I'm pretty sure like this game jam was like a catalyst for a lot of people making accounts to like join the jam, and then like continuing to like put stuff there, right? Like, and then and then game jams are a feature of like the itch era of tabletop RPG design, right? And I think that all, like, there's so many things like happening at the right place at the right time with the emotional mecha jam that like just like spawn a whole bunch of like different like effects, right? Like on focusing not on like mechanics and emotion and more on emotions like you mentioned, but also like after this jams became like a popular thing to do and like practice making small quick games that can be put up on itch, right? And having like the itch store page that can be your portfolio of like, hey, here are all my games. You don't have to go to like look at a forum or a website, or like I don't have to think about making a website to have a place for you to come and look at my games, right? Like that's all like really interesting like mix of things happening at the same time.
From an RPG history point of view, the Emotional Mecha Jam is the event that produced the 2020s, right? Where basically it's ping ponging between Twitter, the Google Plus, refugees, as it were, from 2018, 2019, coming to Twitter, interacting with the global community being able to highlight themselves and say, we are here, we've always been here, we really are aggressively here now, and being able to put people on a much more even playing field. Because earlier than this is the 200-word RPG contest, which again more or less collapsed right after this jam culture starts because it wasn't needed anymore. You can write a 200-word RPG and put it up for sale on itch. Why not? Let's do it. And this is still the central node of indie tabletop publishing.
Right. I think we can't talk about like the 2018 era onwards mech games without addressing Lancer as well. Like that is if we talk about like emotional mecha jam and then like the crunchiest 4E game to come out and use like more modern like crunchy tactics tech in like tabletop RPGs. We have Lancer, which is also tied to another thing, which is that like our media landscape has expanded to not just anime, not just broadcast TV, but Lancer crucially is tied to Kill 6 Billion Demons. It's the same artist who did the art for Lancer, right? And that helps get eyes on the page because like that's an established creator, and that creator got established because of webcomics, right? That all comes together to produce this like point where you get the cool art from Lancer, but also like an existing community that already knows this artist and creator. This is not to discount like the game design of Lancer, but like it's also interesting to see how like web comics and like web media, like we mentioned a lot of like RP and RP communities online as well. Like that's all like really important, and also I would say like the fan fiction as well. like I couldn't watch a lot of Gundam Wing, right? Like I couldn't get it. Like I only watched like episodes at a time. I never watched the whole thing through, right? But what I did have was fan fiction. So a lot of what I think is Gundam Wing might actually be stuff that I know from fan fiction. So it was like, if I watch Gundam Wing now, I'll be like, why are these boys not kissing? And so like fan culture around the internet like shifts and changes, and like the production values of like webcomics and stuff shifts and changes, and the production values of tabletop RPGs being put up on like PDFs and art like you talk about, that also like shifts and changes because like it's easier to find artists who are like into the same sicko shit that you are into, and we are able to like work with each other, right? Yeah. So I think like Lancer is like really interesting as a game, but also as like a symbol of like all of these like internet culture things coming together. Yeah, we already talked about a lot of this, the itch.io indie wave, post Google Plus, post 5e boom, and I do want to mention really quickly that like Wing was also one of the first things media that I knew about that like addressed drone warfare, right? Like with the remote controlled drones and the remote controlled mobile dolls, I think that's what they were called. And that feels like something about like between like the that ties into a little bit of like the cyberpunk and mech part of like what it means to be a human piloting a mech versus an AI piloting a mech, right? There's also Macross Plus, and like all of that is also like brewing and going on. And I know AI stuff is also in Beam Saber as well. I know my Beam Saber campaign was like very much dealing with like we chose the research squad that had the chained AI, and so that our whole campaign became about that. I was like, ooh, what does it mean to be a human piloting a mech, right? Cool. Some of the other stuff that we talked about already: BattleTech, Kill 6 Billion Demons. But I think there's also Heaven Will Be Mine in indie games as well. We talk about games that are not just about simulating metal machine on the battlefield. We had games that also indie video games that also focused on like the interiority of the pilots, and also like the other themes in like mechs, right? I don't know if anyone has anything to add on that.
Heaven Will Be Mine is a masterpiece if you like visual novels, and it is very extreme. It is definitely dealing with, you know, lesbian romance and absolute power over weapons of mass destruction in a colonialist, militaristic environment. So I always feel like it like dials all the themes that we've been talking about up to 11.
And to add to what we were talking about with like getting to know like what everyone else is doing all around the world in this era as well. I also want to talk about notable mecha tabletop RPGs from around the world. Obviously in Japan, in the past there's already stuff in like the 80s with Where's Blade, but there was also other games like Metallic Guardian and Aegis. I don't really know a lot of about these, but I managed to learn about these because for these ones specifically, I learned them from Montro, Mellow Liber on Twitter, and on Blue Sky, who's been trying to like translate indie tabletop RPGs from outside of Japan into Japanese, and also introduce talking about some of the other Japanese tabletop RPGs. I'll quickly I'll shout out Alex Connolly, who got me a copy of like the Armored Core 6 tabletop RPG as well. So like there are stuff being made around the world, and I know we talked about BattleTech being a huge thing, but also Warhammer 40k has mechs, and like that's a huge part of like the aesthetic, like that Warhammer 40k then gets stolen into StarCraft. People get to know about all of this stuff. And then also seeing stuff from Simon Stalenhag and Tales from the Loop, and I know Nick Bate, who's from Australia and in UK at the moment, also made a really great game called Stealing the Throne, which combines not just mecha stories but heist stories as well, and it's really cool. And as Pam mentioned, I think Echo was a huge thing for me as well, because like Kaipo is Malaysian, and it's like really cool for me to see like, oh shit, there are other Malaysians interested and making stuff as well, and like not just finding cool indie game designers, but finding indie game designers that look like me, that are from where I'm from, right? Like that was really important for me to like then go out and like make my own stuff as well. Does anyone else want to like talk about like stuff from? I know Pam, you might have stuff from like around Southeast Asia, around the world.
Well, I think Ray at the time was trying to iterate on Balikbayan, which was not it's not a mech RPG, but it is cyberpunk, and that was like that is the decolonial. We're gonna talk about how to break free from this system. Very emotional RPG. I I don't know the status of it right now because I know Ray's very busy with other projects, but that was the thing, right? And of course, like I mentioned, me and my partner wanted to do public utility mechs. We designed that thing in a day, literally, because we wanted to talk about transforming jeepneys, the symbol of Manila that turns into a transformer. And we wanted to do a thing where we don't really talk about the high concept science fiction. We talk about a concept that was tossed around in our circles called Talier punk, which is what is it like if you've got a very grungy 1980s aesthetic and it's about junkyards. So when you play our game, you're playing mecha pilots fighting aliens, and you are all from the marginalized sectors of the community. So it's the rich pilots who get the fancy Gundams. You get the transforming jeepney, and you have to salvage your parts and move from junkyard to junkyard, dealing with crazy aliens. So that was what we wanted to do to kind of reverse what most of us queers had grown up with the shiny mechs and the longing eye fucking between boy pilots that would be kissing in a fanfic. So that was our way of kind of turning that around. So
But yeah, and then I guess we'll like end on like looking ahead on like what's coming up, right? We've talked about the past, like how mecha tabletop RPGs have changed and grown throughout years, how they've been like an instrumental part of like the different movements in like traditional publishing and also indie publishing, right? Like they have been here from like really early on, and there have been really important games that have it then gone on to influence other games and other like produce other designers as well, and it will continue to do so. We're gonna get more Lancer Armorsters coming out soon-ish. Salvage Union was big last year, I think, or the year before. And I think when we did this, like Violet Core was just on Kickstarter at the time, and it should be like it's being worked on at the moment. So like there's a lot of cool stuff that continues to be made that is, and we'll see how we adapt to everything that's changing as you know the tabletop RPG scene moves up. Mech tabletop RPGs will continue to be around, will stick around, and will move around. There's a new Gundam. There's more like there's more people getting into mecha anime than ever before. I think mecha anime has become a lot more accessible in terms of like just you can turn on it's the Macross Plus movie. I think Macross Plus was on. They put it on Disney Plus.
yes, it's on.
Yeah, I mean,
yep.
That was exactly what I wanted to say. I was like, you
Yeah.
used to have to get it in like either bootleg format or on
Yes.
these expensive VHS cassettes, and now you can just stream it on Disney
on
Plus.
Disney Plus. I think the entirety of Macross is on Disney. I checked because I was trying to matter load for another mech RPG that I can't really talk about, but it is in development and I'm a part of that team. So my first thought was like, is it finally time for Pam to do something Macross related? Because she's literally never done something Macross related, even if that was literally her first mecha RPG ever, right? I think it also helps, of course, that Evangelion got a reboot with the movies and it's finally
yes.
finished, right? So the whole set is there, so you can watch the TV and the other movies and then the other movies, and it'll be 3 different experiences of trauma and pain, which is great, right? And then I know that I saw news that the Macross developers are supposedly teaming up with the Gundam developers for a new Macross anime.
Sunrise is making Macross.
Yeah, so, and that is fascinating to me because I very recently finished Macross Delta, the movies, And I had one fascinating takeaway about Macross. They're very bad at making TV series, but they're really, really good at making movies. So the TV series is like, cool music, not sure where you were going. And then the movie series is like, what the hell is this terrible pain that is being inflicted upon me, right? But yeah, Mecha is so much more accessible. And I mean, G-Witch was every lesbian queer girl's favorite thing for a while. I mean, whether you liked it or not, it was good to see how that series played out. And it had a lot of commentary on a lot of different stuff. So
Yeah, and as we speak, there's a brand new like Gundam series that just started. And then for myself, like I've been working through like the backlog of like Gundam stuff because like a lot of stuff is available for free on like Gundam Info as well now on YouTube. And like there's in like video games as well. Like Armored Core 6 got a lot like because FromSoft became a thing with the Dark Souls games. It got more people to try Armored Core than that might not have tried it before. I think, and I think Armored Core 6 is like one of the best executed video game narratives in a long time. I'm very biased because I love mechs and I love shitty guys, and Armored Core 6 has one of the best shitty guys that I love. Um, so yeah, like I think we are primed for like there's gonna be a lot of cool new stuff coming out of this as well, and yeah, I'm really excited to see more things. I'm working on some more stuff. I know Pam, you just teased some new stuff that you're working on as well. I don't know if anyone else, Evan, I think you mentioned you were working on something as well.
Yeah. This is my giant Robo homage. I'm a big fan of the giant Robo OVAs released in the mid '90s, with this kind of combination of like weird 1970s like disco aesthetic with superpowers and mechs. And so I'm building what would be a detective mystery thriller that of course involves giant mecha battles. And I really am hoping to play test it by the end of the year. But I also I'm building it on a previous set of games that I've submitted to Festival in Denmark, and I'm planning on submitting this to Festival as well. Because again I'm wildly kooky. The first game had 10 characters, the second one had 20 characters, and the third game of course has 40 characters, with interspersed with various mecha. So this mad creation is what I'll leave you with, and of course I will. I have to go put my kids to bed, but I definitely think you should all stay to answer questions.
All right, thank you so much for your time, Evan. Yeah, I also saw in the chat Celestial Bodies just recently concluded their Kickstarter, and that's really cool as well. I think that's Lumen based.
No, that's Apocalypse Frame. Apocalypse Frame.
Frame,
Yes. And I think Celestial Bodies is completely unique.
Yes,
It's
it has the grid
based inventory and combat.
Yep.
Place your gear on the grid, and then you like call out shots like in Battleship.
oh, that's exciting. That's speaking my language.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Good
Okay.
recommendation for sure.
Yep.
Dang.
And I also want to shout out Rust Never Sleeps, which is a solo journaling table mecha game. That's I think the beta is coming out soon. I had a chance to read that, and like that's got some really cool tech in that as well. So I think we will end here on questions. So I don't know if anyone else in the chat has questions, or if y'all have any topics that you want to cover that we didn't get to cover as we were talking about. Feel free to ask any questions. We'll probably stick around for another like 10 minutes or so to answer questions. feel free to post questions into the chat if you have them. We can see the chat, so if you've got any questions and you're watching, feel free to post them. Otherwise, I will ask. Okay, we do have one question already, which is what's the biggest mech you can think of, and what's the smallest mech you can think of?
Okay, well, the biggest is Tengen Topogren Lagan in the very finale of the whole show. I don't think it gets much
Yeah.
bigger than
that.
a mech throwing galaxies at the enemy.
Yep.
Yeah, that took the cake. Yeah. Smallest though, gosh.
Okay,
Can
I have an
probably-
answer for smallest, but it's
Okay,
gonna be
okay, good.
hard to explain.
Okay.
So one of my favorite like mecha shows is a bootleg Korean mecha show called Space Transformer, which took bits of Daitan 5, I think, and the Scope Dog from Votoms, and also the Fantastic Voyage. So in that show, the protagonist gets injected into like a space princess to try and kill the virus that is gonna kill her, and they have a mech that goes inside, and then there's a whole colony of aliens that lives inside the space princess's body. I'm trying to remember. This is like from memory. Yeah, I haven't watched this in like 20 years maybe. And they have they have mechs too, and the enemy has a scope dog little robot, like that actually is like her servant or something. So the tiniest, smallest mechs are the mechs in Space Transformer, which are tiny and inside someone else's body.
Yeah, I don't know anything smaller than that.
Yeah, I can't get that.
Shout out to Space Transformer. Okay, more questions. What's a moment in a mecha show or media that you wish you could emulate the same feeling in a session or game?
Mine is there is a moment in MSVR, The Return of Johnny Raiden, which is a manga, where there are like 8, 10 aces who are all on different sides, but they all have to team up to fight Char.
Oh, that's sick. Yeah. Okay.
And yeah, they all have like all of this history from the 1 Year War, and from like there's cyber new types who are children who were created as a result of that. There's old aces, old types from the war. They're all just
Wow.
like they're all barely hanging on too, and the only reason Char leaves and they kind of win is because he's in an experimental mech that's breaking down from his piloting, and it's just like so good.
That sounds sick as hell.
Yeah.
Reminds me of Forever Red, the Power Rangers episode.
Oh yeah.
Same vibes to me.
Yeah.
I think for me it's two things, because they are like legitimate design challenges. Like, how do you emulate a full-on Neon Genesis Evangelion type mental breakdown? Like, how would you be able to do that? That whole sequence and put that into a game. Like, how do you mechanize that? How do you make that feel very raw and visceral and real, right? And then the second, of course, it would be my Macross version of what you described, where you have the finale to every Macross series, and you've got the singing and the dancing and then the missile fighting and intergalactic hoo-ha coming out of everywhere. Like, that'd just be amazing to design, I think.
The moment that I always want to try and capture is the free fall that a pilot can go through from like high, either like low orbit or just extremely high altitudes, as they are approaching an objective on the ground, or possibly like being trying to catch someone who is not in a mech before they go splat, from extremely high altitudes, and it's just like a battle going on around them while they are trying to manage this 3D space. That is something I often think about, that kind of narrative moment.
You should watch Eureka 7.
I love
I
I love that
am. I
show.
literally am.
No, no,
I
no, not
love
to
that
you.
show.
Just generally,
Generally,
everyone should
generally,
watch Eureka
yes.
7.
Agreed.
That happens quite a few times.
Yeah, I love that series so much.
Yeah.
It's
Just
very good.
It's
Yeah.
very good.
I think the moment that I really like, and kind of ties into the next question, so that's why I want to answer it, is the moment where your mech breaks down and like you only have like one arm or something. So the last shooting moment in original Gundam is like emblematic of this, right? And like why, like it's better if like the mechs can't be replaced with a fighter jet or dragon, because like yeah, your head gets blown off. You just open up the cockpit and like look outside. Because that's not a real hit. That's just your camera, and then like seeing the disconnect between like the pilot who is kind of still okay and the mech in a human body that's like breaking down, and yeah, like that moment is like incredible in like for me, right? Like that's my like the thing that I love about like mech fiction is like seeing that disconnect between the human body and the like the mech body, right? Yeah. And yeah, so the next question is, what are the best games that really feel like the mechs couldn't just be replaced with a fighter jet or a dragon? I'm not gonna answer this part because I made the game that you can replace the mech with a fighter jet or a dragon and it doesn't really matter.
I did the same thing with Beam Saber, so
Yeah, I'm not sure, cause like I mean, public utility mechs, you definitely cannot replace that with a fighter jet and a dragon, because that was by design for us, right? Like we want you to feel the clunkiness of having the crappiest junkyard machine that you possibly could. There's no fighter jet here. Maybe you'll get a fighter jet engine and you'll strap it to your jeepney, but that's about as far as you go. So
I think the thing that question is sort of indirectly asking is like what are the necessary parts for the mecha experience, right? Like if what is unique to mechs as a narrative exploration, you know? That you answer that question, what you want from mechs, and that will give you the answer of what can't replace them. Because like we talked earlier about how mechs are like, in a sense, stand-ins for fighter jets or for tanks, but there's also the occasional series or mecha fiction where they are in fact a stand-in for infantry. Particularly, I was thinking of Armored Trooper Bottoms, which is far more the ATs feel more like infantry than they do a particular vehicle, just large infantry.
Yeah, well, that's a great answer. Do you have something, Takuma, or otherwise I'll go to the next question?
Yeah, I don't have a specific thing, but definitely when it comes to like weight, I want my mechs to be heavy and have heft in a way that I don't think a fighter jet or a dragon would feel the same kind of feeling for me. I really like when mecha games have weight.
Cool. All right. So the next question is, as an aspiring RPG creator with an interest in creating mecha games, how would you recommend starting out?
So I don't. Oh,
go ahead,
Pam.
Austin. No, you go ahead, Austin. Go ahead.
Okay. I don't think that writing a mecha game is that much different than writing any other tabletop role-playing game, ultimately. It's just a matter of, you take notes about what you want the game to do, what are the narrative beats you want to hit, what are some ideas you have about how you would mechanize those beats to ensure that they happen. And then you just keep asking questions about those mechanics and those themes, and you answer your own questions, and you ask questions about the answers, and soon enough you've got a huge pile of notes, and then you have to, unfortunately, turn it into prose that other people can understand.
Just to add to what Austin said too, I think it always helps me at least to come up with like the 3 really cool things that you want to talk about, because everybody who loves this kind of genre has like the 3 big things, or at least like at least 3 things that you really enjoy. We already talked about our emblematic moments, right? Like the stuff that we see in the mecha genre that we would like to turn into a system. At least speaking from my perspective, every single mech RPG that I've done always centered around at least one of those experiences. So I talked a lot about the junkyard, public utility mechs. I made another one where it is, you are I've forgotten the name of my own game, but it was a card game, and the Revenant. And the thing with that is, it is the final moment of that you are dying and you have to bring your mech home, and that is a thing that happens in some war or mech anime, and I wanted to turn that singular moment into an entire game. So, like, just riffing off Lawson, right? Come up with the 3 to 5 things that really strike you, and you can design around that, and then you can shift it as you need to.
Yeah, like being really clear about the themes that you want to explore, and then I know we didn't. I think we got to talk about some themes that like resonate with us through the Q&A, and we did get to mention some of the stuff. But like, so for example, for me in like Spectres, like I really wanted to talk about like the bridging between the gap between like a human body and like a mech body is like the scale that you operate at, right? Like I think Evan mentioned like mega damage, but like the resonant part of that was like in Gundam F91, there's an infamous scene where a civilian dies because a mech shell casing falls on her, and the mech pilot wasn't even aiming the gun at her, right? In fact, like it was aiming the gun away from her, and it's just the fall of the giant casing that like kills her, right? And like you have such difference in scale, and like the impacts of your actions can be devastating for people around you that you don't even know, right? So like that was really important to me for like Spectres, that like when you do stuff, like you can cause damage, you can cause blood to happen, and you can cause collateral damage in ways that you can't fully control, right? Like Takuma, you mentioned about mechs having heft and weight, but to me that's also about mechs not being fully under your control, right? There are systems in the mech that are not your body systems, and it's not like you have full control over your body as well, but like the mech in the mech, it's even more like abstracted, and it's even more like alienated between yourself. Like there's that uh, separation between yourself and the body that's like really interesting to me. So like when I think about how mechs are used in the game, I wanted to think about that, and I broke out some of the stuff that I used like a pretty similar to like Belonging, Outside Belonging, No Dice No Master System, but the stuff that I added on top of that is stuff that I wanted to reflect that part of like what it meant to be in a mech, right? So even if you are hacking an existing game, for example, right, like if you start your like game design journey by like taking a game that you like and know well and hack that, that's also a really good exercise to say, okay, here's what I want to take away and here's what I want to add based on like the things that are important to me thematically. Yeah.
Just sort of to add on a little bit about what you're saying about hacking existing games, something to do when you're doing that is any mechanics you're thinking of porting over to your hack, think about what the purpose is for that mechanic in the original game, and whether that mechanic still adequately serves the same purpose in your game. An example of that from Beam Saber is coin in Blades in the Dark, or your stash rather, is really what I'm talking about. Is you build up your stash by putting money into your savings, and then that determines what your epilogue is. But that doesn't make a lot of sense for a mecha game, for the mecha genre, outside of very specific stories. And so I had to create something new to replace that, to act as a new sort of epilogue mechanic.
Cool. We'll probably just do a couple more questions. Then we'll end at like past. Cool. Really quick, is Real Steel 2011 mecha? No, you have to be inside to be mecha. Really quick. Do you find you have more fun in games where everyone is a pilot, or games where some of the characters are pilots and others are people who don't get inside giant robots?
So I made Beam Saber specifically so that everyone has access to a mech, even classes like the hacker and the bureaucrat, because people often felt left out if everyone else had a mech and then they didn't. So yeah, I think either you can play a game where everyone's in a mech or everyone's out of a mech, but if it's split, then the people who don't have mechs need to be making an extremely conscious decision about that and what that means.
I think kind of splitting the difference, like, yeah, I've played a lot of Beam Saber, and then we've also had a lot of missions where some people were doing things out of the mech for most of the mission, or like they just didn't use their mechs. Like, you know, there's like a social thing going on while some people are mechs. Like, I do think having a mix is good. I don't know if I think that I have more fun in one or the other, but I like having a mix in like how that comes about, like, depends on the game.
Yeah.
It's important for conveying scale. If you don't have something to convey scale with a mech, it might as well just be a giant person.
Yep. I'll add on to that, because I know in Beam Saber you have a vehicle which does not necessarily need to be a mech, right? So in the Beam Saber campaign I played, one of my characters didn't have a mech. They had a flying car. They were the like bureaucrat kind of. I can't remember the specific playbook, what the playbook was called, but like they were basically like the handler bureaucrat handling all like the logistic stuff. And then in missions they would just zoom around in a flying car. Which was still really fun, and like they did a lot of like the like scouting and logistics and like making sure everyone was where they needed to be, but they weren't in a mech per se, and there were a lot of situations where it's like, shit, why are you in your tiny shitty car flying around? We don't want to hurt, we don't want you to like get into trouble, right? Which is really fun, right? Like you can still be in the fray without being in a quote unquote mech, right? Like you could be like even being on like the ship, if the ship has to get involved in the combat, that can be fun as well. Or you have games where like I know there's some games where you play two characters. Like you might play a character that is out of combat and on the bridge, and then also a pilot, right? And yeah, I think it's a really good contrast, like you mentioned, to convey scale, but also like a really interesting thing that you brought up, I think, when we were discussing this panel, Austin, was that like some of the thing about being in a mech is that it takes logistics to maintain a mech, and I think it was you, Austin, that brought it up, right? That like it makes you reliant on like hegemonic organizations. It makes you reliant on the army, right? Rather than just being like the mech needs the mechanic that you can fall in love with. Like the mech needs the mechanic and like the fuel and resources. You need to go back to the ship to reload. All those scenes of like in Gundam, like every time the pilots come out and like fucking eat a burger because they need to eat, refuel quickly, and then go back out again, right? Like that is also what it means to be a mech in a war story, right? Like it's the whole chain of logistics that supports the mech. It's also interesting in conveying the scale that you're operating at, not just the physical scale, right? But like the logistical scale as well. Cool. Last question. Last one. Just so that we can end on a fun one. Like, what's a character in a mecha tabletop RPG you made that still lives fondly in your heart?
So I had an utterly crazy polyamorous disaster in Lancer who was a full contrast to my very cool customer of a non-binary character who just like non-binary one was like, I'm here for one job. This girl who has been flirting with me is very hot and we will have a thing, but otherwise I'm your lean mean fighting machine. My polyamorous queer disaster was like, I want to fuck you up and possibly fuck you after. And he was great. Came at a wonderful time. My only regret is that I was not able to finish that campaign because I moved to Canada. So I think that was like, he continues to live very fondly in my heart.
Character, I am a forever GM, so I don't really get to make my own characters most of the time, other than the NPCs. But the mecha TTRPG character that I fondly remember is a canon NPC in Beam Saber, Lady Elreth, the goddess of war and death, who is a tier 3 squad on her own. And she there's a couple unofficial rules that are necessary for a Beam Saber campaign. You know, things like the officer is a bastard. The players hate their patron faction, and then the one that often comes up, but not always, is that the players are low key horny for Lady Elreth. Because she is always down to destroy them in combat.
Oh, in combat, yep.
In a fight.
Mm-hmm.
So since I mostly GM as well, my memorable character from the Beam Saber campaign is more like the one that I liked having around because he was, as established, I like shitty guys in mech stories. I love Jared Mesa fan club over here. I love Iguazu. Iguazu is the worst person. So I had an NPC, a recurring NPC, who went by Weed Lord Vegeta 69, and that was the call sign. And he was part of like a revolutionary group that also loves weed. Yeah, he's like a stereotype of like a shitty anarchist, dirtbag boyfriend, who the party had to deal with from time to time, and even had to like convince him that like they were on the up and up in like trying to like help the revolutionaries. So they have to convince Wee Lord Vegeta 69 that they were cool. It's just fun to have like shitty NPCs turn up. Notably his mech had a lot of smoke grenades. It was just smoke all the time. It was just dropping smoke and disappearing all the time. That's his move. Takuma?
Probably my Beam Saber character, because I've mostly GM'd, but I did get to play Beam Saber that one time, and I do always remember Keiko Tuesday, call sign Pitchfork, who had some run-ins with Lady Elrath, which were fine. They went fine, totally fine.
You beat her first phase.
Yeah, you know, just yeah. It's okay. It's okay. She made it out. Yeah, she has a big heavy mech that was for farming, and she gets gay married and is happily ever after, and I don't have to worry about her ever again.
All right. All right. I think that will be us for tonight. Thank you everyone for being on the panel. Thanks to Evan who's had to go and deal with family. But thank you Austin. Thank you Takuma. Thank you Pam for doing this panel again. It was a great time doing it last year with y'all, and it's great again to do it. And thank you everyone for watching.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, just before we go, we obviously didn't get to all the questions, but if you ask those questions on Blue Sky and add us, I bet that we would be happy to answer
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah. Yeah, like I love talking mechs anytime. And yeah, thank you everyone for watching. And this should go up on YouTube as well, so there should be an archive of it if you came in late or if you missed it and you want to share it with your friends. Yeah, and you can find us on Blue Sky. I will just quickly...
Austin Ramsay Games on most social media, Blue Sky, Mastodon, Tumblr.
I should be smarter about this. There we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can find me on at Aaron Lim most places, and Evans that Pam.
Yep. On Blue Sky, please don't look for me on Twitter.
And Takuma at No Road Home on Itch and on Blue Sky. So thank you everyone, and good night. See ya.